So Winnie the Pooh is a huge asset for Disney. Like, put it into perspective, and it's ridiculous. Films, shows, direct-to-video productions, a live-action film that somehow includes a war scene. Side note, I bawled like a baby when I saw this in theaters. Sue me, I grew up with Winnie the Pooh. A.A. Milne's silly old bear has grown into quite the money magnet for Disney. So it's no big surprise that Pooh as a franchise has had its fair share of video games. Mostly preschool games for like the PC and maybe like a minigame collection for the Game Boy. Today, however, we'll be looking at three Winnie the Pooh games released for home consoles. Kind of a trilogy-ish. We'll get into it. So Winnie the Pooh is known for being funny, kind, gentle, just a warm blanket of a series. Most of the time. They're mostly good, actually. Mostly good. Quick background, up until the year 2000, the year the first game we're talking about was released, Pooh had only had a few video game offerings. Most were part of Disney's animated storybook series released primarily on PC, a series that was right up my alley just letting me point and click forever. It wasn't until the year 2000 that Pooh actually showed up on a dedicated video game console with Winnie the Pooh Adventures in the 100-Acre Wood for the Game Boy Color, a minigame collection. I actually had this one as a kid. It's sweet, if a bit slight. Not surprising, really. However, later that year, the franchise would make the jump to 3D, or rather 2.5D, with the first game we're talking about today, Tigger's Honey Hunt for the original PlayStation. Hopping away from a minigame point-and-click space, Tigger's Honey Hunt was a side-scrolling platformer where players traverse various locations in and outside of the 100-Acre Wood as Tigger himself, jumping and bouncing his way around various obstacles and, well, some enemies. It's Winnie the Pooh, we're not exactly going to get hand-to-hand combat. We just get some jumping on enemies, which are honestly very, very sparse. Story-wise, unsurprisingly, the game is also very light. Pooh here wants to have a party and he's going to need honey to pair with it. Seeing as he's a gluttonous monster who consumes all that passes near him, he's fresh out. Can't imagine what Pooh would turn to if bees went extinct.
Hello, Vicky.
So, playing as Tigger, we bounce around and collect the main, well, collectible, honey pots. Convenient that they're already in containers. This is a strictly side-scrolling affair as well, not a problem. But with other Disney PlayStation games of the time like Hercules and Tarzan coming out prior, I'm kind of surprised there wasn't any gimmicky forward and backward movement added to the proceedings, perhaps just keeping it simple for the younger target demographic. So Tigger himself really is tailor-made to star in a platforming game, like, he bounces. That's his thing, it makes sense. Actually, however, there really isn't much to his moveset when the game starts. He kind of trots when you first start moving, eventually transitioning into a light bounce. Really, most of your vertical movement early on comes from light single hops along with jumping on stage obstacles, most notably spiderwebs, to send you flying in various directions. It isn't until later in the game where you gain a super bounce ability where you simply aim Tigger in the direction you want to go. Release and he ascends. You raise me up. I say later in the game, but this thing is done in like 2 hours. Listen, there's 9 levels and 3 of them are mini-games. Oh, speaking of the mini-games, yeah. First up is Rabbit Says, where you have to mimic Rabbit's movements and repeat the pattern. Elementary stuff, except... Look, I think this game looks great. The graphics are fantastic for the time, and it really brings the 100-Acre Wood and its inhabitants to life. But in Rabbit Says...
Hooray!
A baby? A monster?
The second minigame is cute. It's a little game of Pooh sticks. Straightforward enough. You drop your stick on one end of the river strategically to take advantage of the visible water currents, and the first stick to pass under the bridge wins. Again, simple, but I was super charmed by this little game. It's drawn from the original A.A. Milne books, so it's a nice gesture to include it here. The sticks are even painted to show which character it belongs to. Cute. Finally, we have Paper, Scissors, Owl, a clear mimic of Rock, Paper, Scissors. This one I'm less of a fan of, as it's all completely dependent on luck with Owl's AI to make a choice that allows the player to win. Also, dear lord, the giant scissors. Just kidding, this is a horror game. So yeah, only 6 platforming levels. When I say it aloud, it really makes you think. Short, but 1, it's a kid's game. They tend to be kind of shorter by nature. And 2, it's still pretty fun. Listen, I got a Pooh bias. I grew up with these characters through the original Disney film, but mostly from the still stellar TV show The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Check it out on Disney+, it holds up. Tigger's Honey Hunt in turn came out to coincide with the theatrical release of the Tigger movie, the first of 3 Pooh films produced by Disney Toon Studios. While not a movie adaptation, there's a tragic lack of whoop-de-dooper, loop-de-looper, alley-ooper bounce ability, but it still captures the animated world remarkably well, as long as you don't play this game on the Nintendo 64. That version loses all the voice dialogue along with any animated FMV clips. It's a big loss and makes the PS1 edition the definitive release with ease. Otherwise, the two releases are the same. There's also a PC version, but I've never played it. Though from what I understand, it's the same as the PlayStation edition. Yes, the technology here is limited based on the mind-blowing worlds we've seen today in games, but it really just captures the spirit of the characters. There's just such personality here, and while most of the levels default to forest or cave, there's enough here to keep things interesting. You talk to various characters throughout as well as you help them find certain items, or in Kanga's case, her freaking child. Do better, Kanga. Also, the wiki page for this game specifically states on the single item fetch quest each level, and I quote, while most items are not alive, in the 8th level, the player must find Rue. I don't know why, it just kind of hits me funny, like, don't worry, you don't have to collect living things all the time. Wink. While I mentioned this is a strictly left-to-right affair, once Tigger has more abilities unlocked, the verticality of the levels greatly increase. There could be a fair amount going on in these levels too, especially towards the end. And it was genuine fun to explore and find as many secret areas as I could to get 100% completion on honeypots. You had to collect a certain amount to unlock the next level, which is an extremely easy goal to meet save for the final platforming level, where you basically have to collect all of them to head to the end. First time I actually got stumped for a minute in this game searching for that last hidden area, not gonna lie. While I do think Tigger's Honey Hunt is a solid effort, I do wish there was a bit more. Just a few more levels, maybe some boss encounters. I know Pooh is a non-violent property, for the most part. But just a little more would put this game easily in the recommended category for me. As it is, I'd say check it out if you're a Pooh fan. Platformer fans in general, watch a playthrough and see if you'd be into it. What's here is good, don't get me wrong, but there's just not enough here to justify a purchase unless you can find the game super cheap. Might be worth it for those rabbit faces though, honestly. Next up on the list, we're jumping 3 years and a console generation to Piglet's big game for the GameCube. This is baby's first horror game, by the way. I wish I was joking. So, Piglet's big game. Based on the title, this is technically another movie tie-in, in this case with 2003's Piglet's big movie. But like Tigger's Honey Hunt, this game kind of does its own thing, telling its own story with Piglet as a star. Now this time we trade the platforming for the adventure genre. Piglet's a very small animal, so jumping extraordinaire he is not. So the whole conceit is Piglet wanting to find the courage to be brave. Sure, makes sense. However, each level somehow involves Piglet entering his friends' dreams to save them from their nightmares. Okay, weird, I can roll with it, but this is quite the premise. Piglet gaslights his friends into thinking he's courageous. The game. For kids. When you first boot up the game, it actually is a visual stunner. The 100-acre woods are super lush here, and everything just looks really, really good. It even has real-time shadows. Maybe its licensed for kids status makes my expectations lower than usual, but this game looks great, and that's before we even get to the visual design of each dream level. Another cute bit is that you adjust the settings by actually running around an area of the wood. Like, it gives great visual indicators for kids on what stereo versus mono sound are, along with turning controller vibration on and off. It's just a clever way of presenting these options to a younger audience to help them understand how the game works. I dig it. Now let's jump into the game's first level, Pooh's Dream. Pooh is a portly bear, so naturally his dream is just a straight up Candyland. Chocolate River and all, just don't get on any boat. The visual design of these levels just rock. We'll get to the others in a minute, don't want to ruin the surprise, but it's a ton of fun, inspired, and really goes the extra mile you wouldn't expect from a kid's game. Seriously, hats off to the developers Doki Denki. So as I said, Piglet's big game is an adventure game, albeit a very basic one. Not surprising. You run around as Piglet, who has a very limited moveset, really only able to do this little kick. You also collect various items throughout the game to use on basic puzzles, and those are activated with another button. That's it. They keep it simple, and it's really to the game's benefit. It had to be easily accessible for children. So starting off in Pooh's Dream, and go to find the bear has gotten himself stuck in some caramel. Naturally. I mean, I feel like being stuck in honey would have been the more obvious choice, but you know, whatever. Moving on, as we go find a way to save Pooh, we encounter our very first enemy of the game. Yes, enemies. This game has some. And I'm not gonna lie, when I played this game as a kid, I genuinely got a bit freaked out by them. To be fair, I was like 9, but yeah, I was scared by a Winnie the Pooh game. This is the part where I put a clown nose on my face and this sound would play. Quonky! In my and the game's defense, they really try to put you in the shoes of Piglet as a character. He's a small little guy and the animation work here is so well done. His body language and general shaky demeanor really sells the fear of the heffalumps and woozles that torment you throughout this adventure. Yeah, they're colorful and all, but they're huge in comparison to Piglet, really dialing up that light fear factor. Remember when I said baby's first horror game? Yeah, not a joke. This is a pretty dang spooky kids game. Being chased down by all these menacing creatures, a big door that loves a good cackle, level design that's dark, spooky, and at times even disorienting. Yeah, I'd call this a horror game. A horror game for toddlers, but horror all the same. So the way combat works here is that when you enter a room and hear the booming steps of a heffalump or the little giggles of a woozle, find him and get him to notice you, and this button prompt will appear on the screen. This takes you to, space where the enemy slowly approaches and a little button sequence appears at the bottom of the screen. Simply put in the button sequence on your controller, left to right, and Piglet puts on a brave face. Here, starting out just sticking his tongue out. Do it once or twice in this first level and the enemy is defeated and turned into a, potion. Look, I played this game in full and I still could never explain it. So that's the gameplay loop. Run around, collect items, solve basic puzzles, and defeat enemies with Piglet's brave faces.
Oh, and cookies.
Yeah, there is one.
Sorry, way too much.
There is one collectible. Cookies. For some reason. Really, we're in characters' dreams. It's best not to worry about logic in this kind of scenario. Kicking random objects in an environment draws cookies out that you have to collect 10 at once, every time. They're bouncy buggers too, like Doki Dinky was really proud of their physics engine or something. These things go everywhere. And annoyingly, if you don't collect them in time, they return to where they came from. Not the biggest deal, but sometimes these things go flying, and it absolutely gets repetitive having to constantly run back and forth collecting these things. Dear God, why are they so bouncy? Anyway, it just gets repetitive, and yes, this is entirely on me, but when I'm a completionist who wants to get all the cookies...
All of the cookies.
But you do need them to get Piglet's newer, more powerful brave faces, so it's worth it in the end. I might have a 100 plus cookie surplus after getting all the faces, but it's fine. And also the little victory pose Piglet does when you find all the cookies in a room is hilarious with how abrupt it is.
That's it?
Also just... the brave faces? You thought rabbit was a situation? I mean, I get it, they're terrifying. I really can't praise the art direction for each level enough. It's just a lot of fun. From Pooh's Candyland, we head to Rouge's Dream, which looks completely handcrafted by a child out of cardboard and paper. It's super great. Then there's Owl's Dream, which is just a wild combo of dark buildings and various books and knickknacks all over the place. These environments really are the star of the show, and that's not knocking the rest of the game. They're a ton of fun to look at and just really inspired. And also, surprise, this game's got multiple playable characters too. For brief sequences, Pooh and Tigger become available a few times throughout the game. They play differently too. With Pooh, the goal is to find a lever to pull to help Piglet progress. But he doesn't have brave faces like Piglet. In his case, Pooh has to really book it, or at least waddle a bit, and run away from Heffalumps and Woozles and either get to the next room or find the switch for Piglet. It can actually get a bit difficult too, as the game slowly adds in bonus enemies like the Bumblebee Heffalump that can move faster, so you at times have to actually strategically plan out a pathway that'll keep everyone away from the silly old bear. It's a fine change of pace. Now, the next playable character is Tigger, and I'm going in thinking there's gonna be some nice platforming thrown in here. Not necessarily like Tigger's Honey Hunt style gameplay, but something for a little variety. The f***? I know this game's already a bit weird due to taking place in the dreams of its characters, but when you see Tigger, a hyperactive, rambunctious character, and think stealth gameplay, it doesn't match. I mean, it plays just fine. It's not terribly interesting as the game just becomes a sort of Sly Cooper-like scenario, except a hell of a lot slower, but it's just odd. One of the game's biggest strengths is how well it translates these classic characters into the video game world, and it just strikes me as bizarre with how it misses the mark so completely with Tigger. On a more positive note, however, the difficulty for the game is actually pretty nice. Yes, still a kid's game, so it's never that bad, but more enemies are introduced that add in small gimmicks that make inputting those buttons as Piglet a little more difficult. From mystery buttons that's all trial and error to cycling buttons, this game does keep you on your toes. Though this Woozle here that forces me to tilt my head to the side and give me neck problems can go into his little potion and stay there, stop it! It's the worst. Along with that, there thankfully isn't much penalty for messing up. If an enemy reaches Piglet before defeat, they'll scare him, making him run away. This throws Piglet into a panic, amusingly also shown on the loading screens, but also allowing him to move faster and run away to safety. The only way to restore Piglet's confidence are these red Christopher Robin balloons dotted throughout the worlds. Just approach one and this scene plays.
Everything will be alright, Piglet. To overcome your fears, you must believe in yourself.
Oh, thank you, Christopher Robin. I feel better already.
Don't know how Christopher Robin over here got here, but A, it works and restores Piglet's pluck immediately. Tragically, this is the only thing Christopher Robin ever says, so expect to hear this quick speech a lot if you have any trouble. Thankfully, you can be strategic and just mash the A or X buttons to ensure you max out the distance between you and the Heffalump or Woozle. You can even cancel out of the button sequence with no real progress lost to create some more distance for safety. Running around in circles trying to stay away from enemies isn't exactly the bravest strategy, but it works. I might be traumatized by the fancy Woozle, but it's fine. So, after progressing through the dreams of all of the 100 Acre Wood, which additionally includes Eeyore, Rabbit, and Tigger, the final level throws us into the real world with 100 Acre Wood suffering some flooding. I swear this place floods every other week. Somehow, the Heffalumps and Woozles have leapt out of the dream world and manifested here, so finally Piglet has to show that he's truly learned how to be brave and save all of his friends. Shockingly, easier said than done. The level involves some basic puzzles figuring out how to get to each character and then defeating the enemy to save them. However, what the game doesn't tell you is that there's a particular order to doing it, as if any enemy reaches someone like, in my game, Eeyore, you lose and have to start the entire level over again. So I can check Rage at a Winnie the Pooh game off the list of things I never thought would ever happen to me? To 2020, everyone. In the end, once everyone is saved, the great big shadow of the Granosaurus, a shadow that scared Piglet at the beginning of the game, appears and threatens the entire group. Kind of cool, creating a surprisingly tense final stand. In the end, Piglet defeats the shadow, proves his bravery, and is celebrated by all his friends. Simple and cute. Overall, Piglet's game is genuinely great. Yes, it's a kid's game with an intentionally slow pace, but it's easily leagues ahead of a lot of games targeting a similarly younger audience. The graphics and environments are inspired, the soundtrack and voice acting is all lively and top-notch, and its gameplay keeps it simple, spooky, and effective. Again, baby's first horror game. Seriously, sure it has its issues like Tigger's gameplay, annoying collectibles, and an unfortunate amount of backtracking, but you really can't go wrong if you need a game for kids. I seriously recommend it. It's an unexpected delight. So this is an unexpected surprise. 2 Pooh games down, and they're both good. Listen, I'm as surprised as you are. Now let's talk about the third. Winnie the Pooh's Rumbly Tumbly Adventure for the GameCube. Leave it in an open field and never return. Yeah, hot streak over. Tigger's Honey Hunt was a cute, fun 2D platformer. Piglet's Big Game was a surprisingly surreal and creative adventure game. And Winnie the Pooh's Rumbly Tumbly Adventure. A game that really said, what if we take what was good about the Piglet game and make it exponentially worse? This one's a peculiar case. It really is blatantly reusing a lot of assets from Piglet's Big Game, but this is from an entirely different development team known as Phoenix Studio that worked closely with Ubisoft, the game's publisher, for the majority of its existence. And no, it's not that Phoenix Games.
Okay, girls and boys.
Away, foul creature! Real quick, Phoenix Studio really wasn't around for that long. They most notably developed Peds, with a Z, along with a video game adaptation of the classic film Arthur and the Revenge of the Maltazard. Classic? They were also working on a Rayman 4. Nope, seriously, Rayman 4. It was sadly canceled in favor of... But so it goes in game development. Winnie the Pooh's Rumbly Tumbly Adventure. Remember those Pooh segments from Piglet's Big Game where you ran around avoiding Heffalumps and Woozles? Yeah, that's basically this whole game. Like, straight up. The flimsy plot, if you can even say this game has one, is that Pooh is hungry, so Christopher Robin says to think about happy memories instead. So Pooh thinks about his time his friends had birthdays. That's the story. Okay, fine, sure. Piglet's game focused on dreams, this one focuses on birthdays. At least we'll get some creative level design like its predecessor, right? Some fun, personalized birthday parties for each character. It's a little less interesting than the Dream Worlds, but it'll still be cute and fun. It's just the 100 Acre Wood. Literally the same locations for every single level, just adding extra rooms each time. I'm not joking, this is seriously the level of creativity we're at here. Rock f***ing bottom. Normally I wouldn't be so hard on a Winnie the Pooh game of all things, but after the creativity and personality featured in Piglet's Big Game, higher expectations were set, and now they've been destroyed. This game is just actively awful, you guys. But I'm already here, you're already watching.
Like, comment, and subscribe.
Let's just run through this thing real quick. So the primary gameplay loop, at least for exploration, isn't much change from Piglet's Big Game. Run around areas, kick items to get honey pots this time instead of cookies, and now they fly away even further than the cookies ever did, forcing you to return to kick or belly bump on objects multiple times in acts of tedium that are just exhausting and not fun at all. Like I said, I'm normally a completionist, but I just gave up here. It wasn't worth it. Oh, and just running around, talking to characters and collecting items to do the thing in various areas, so whoever's birthday it is a successful one. You don't even get to see any kind of birthday party. You just hear the narrator say something like, and so Eeyore's birthday was the most splendid, all thanks to Winnie the Pooh. And that's it, just bland forest environments the entire time. Like, the game still looks good at least. It's building off the previous work Doki Denki did, but Pooh has such a timeless art style and the characters translate well in 3D that it all is thankfully pleasant to look at. Doesn't help that you're just seeing the same environments again and again and again, but at least they aren't ugly. It's also a good point to make that this game can be easily beaten in less than 3 hours. I mean, it's just 5 levels, much less substantial than Piglet, which was an 8 hours or more game. So now instead of warding off Heffalumps and Woozles with bravery, Pooh just waddles around areas berries and has to find a balloon that he pops to scare the enemies and make them vanish. Again, that's it. I'm not saying Tigger's Honey Hunt and Piglet's Big Game were games full of extreme depth in their gameplay systems, but at the very least they were able to stay entertaining through to the end with some variety in their challenge progression. Rumbly Tumbly just adds more enemies, and if you mess up, they just throw you back into the room and move the balloon closer to make it easier. No creative solutions, no actual challenge. There are other playable characters too, like a little brief minigame of Pooh riding on poor Eeyore's back as you catch butterflies and the like within certain time limits. Harmless diversion. And the Piglet gameplay returns for 5 minutes, but I'll take it. It's the same, but oh, thank goodness, I never thought I'd be so happy to see what really boils down to a bunch of QuickTime events again. It's only a few times, but it's nice to get the Piglet Brave Face combat again, if only to alleviate some of the monotony from these proceedings. It's fleeting positivity. God, there's really not much to say overall. Rumbly Tumbly Adventure simply plays like a diet-neutered basic version of Piglet's Big Game here. I'm not entirely sure what happened. This game came out in 2005, just 2 years after Piglet, yes, but I guess Phoenix Studio got all these assets and didn't know what to do with them. It's just such a come down from the creativity of 2003 to something just so bare bones. There are 2 other modes, mind you, but there's nothing to really write home about. There's a junior mode for the even younger demographic, like literally first time a kid picks up a controller demographic. You just run around various areas clicking on objects to see a cute little cutscene. Simple and clean. Lastly, surprisingly, is a multiplayer mode. There's a few minigames, though I think most notably there's a scare-off game that takes the brave face button pressing and makes it a competition to see who can finish their combo first. And in this case, we get some Pooh brave faces. Doesn't quite reach the heights of the horrors Piglet showcase, but hey, it's something. Well, I can easily recommend the first 2 games we talked about. For anyone curious, avoid Rumbly Tumbly Adventure. It's sad and disappointing we couldn't have 3 hit games in a row. Maybe I set my expectations too high, but oh, this game is just so bad, guys. Just stay away. Oh, also, at the end of the game, Pooh recalls his own birthday, and the game ends with this bizarre little puzzle where you have to light these 4 candles in an ice cave. Don't ask. Before a timer runs out. A shockingly difficult task. No joke, it took me nearly 10 times to finally get it done as I sat watching the clock run out as Pooh rummaged in his, pocket for a lit candle. Just adventure game things. Weird way to end the game itself, but I made it happen eventually, and I actually seriously imagine kids having a huge struggle with this. I mean, if you have a kid, don't force them to play this thing. And thus the game ends, with Christopher Robin having a picnic for Pooh with all of his friends and finally letting the poor bear eat. Look, he's starving. Kind of a bummer to end on a bad game. That's no fun. So Kingdom Hearts. While Tigger's Honey Hunt and Piglet's Big Game are solid video game adaptations of Winnie the Pooh, really my favorite use of Winnie the Pooh in the game world is with Kingdom Hearts. Sure, the 100 Acre would appear strictly as a minigame world, but my nostalgia is powerful and the characters always were so well designed and animated in the series. Jumping on tree trunks with Tigger, leaping out of the Winnie the Pooh book itself with Pooh in tow only to be hit by a huge snowball, sending Pooh to his death by swing. When I think of Winnie the Pooh in video games, this is where my mind goes, with Kingdom Hearts 2 being the best iteration of Pooh and Friends appearances. Sure, they returned in the recent Kingdom Hearts 3 with a truly awesome new cel-shaded storybook look, and Lumpy, the character no one cares about, is here for some reason, but that appearance is slight at best with only 1 minigame with 3 different variations. It's fine, but not what I expected in the return of this world. We could talk about how I think a beautiful conclusion to the 100 Acre Wood storyline in this series would be Sora passing the book down to some kid in Twilight Town or Radiant Garden whose name happens to be Christopher Robin, but that's another video, we don't have to talk about that right now. Overall though, save for a bit of a blight with Rumbly Tumbly, Winnie the Pooh has a pretty great track record as a video game series. Cute, portable minigames, some point-and-click PC games, and 2 solid 3D games on home consoles. And also Rumbly Tumbly, but that's just 1 game. Beyond Kingdom Hearts though, Pooh hasn't seen another console game released since 2005. And you know what? Let's bring it back. Honestly, it's such a delightful world with such funny, lovely characters that I really think more can be done. What the genre would be, I don't know. I can always go for a good platformer, but hopefully we'll see more from this bear with very little brain and friends eventually. Anyway, ups and downs, but I genuinely recommend these first 2 games. They're little gems that I think you'll probably enjoy. Sure, they're made for kids, but if you grew up with Winnie the Pooh characters, it's a really fun way to experience these characters all over again in such a different medium, complete with terrifying faces that may haunt me for years to come. Worth it? Thank you guys so much for watching. These games were a lot of fun to cover, so I hope you really enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy it, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing, and clicking that notification bell so you know when I upload. The YouTube algorithm demands audience participation. What do you expect? And if you'd like to find me on other platforms, I stream all the time over on my Twitch channel, including these Winnie the Pooh games we just learned about, along with Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. Follow me there. It's very easy. Also, if you want to see some more licensed games I've covered, you can check out my video on the Avatar The Last Airbender video games, or maybe this one on the VeggieTales Larry Boy PS2 game that, yes, is very, very real. Happy New Year, everyone. See you in 2021.